It is Friday, March 15th, my apologies, March 15th, 2019. It is 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and so you know what time it is. It's time for a little bit of coin metal. And we definitely had a lot of fun while getting our asses kicked today at Jiu-Jitsu. It's good. Get your ass kicked at Jiu-Jitsu Friday. Although I'll be honest, I have a little bit of difficulty remembering exactly what specifically we did cover today. Although it kind of came back to me while I was talking about it just now. Is we are doing a really interesting way to get into a full mount position from the side control, and it's funny. It's one of those things where I'd already been kind of doing it. But here I am coming to find out that that's part of the thing. That we do that here as part of jiu-jitsu, and it's kind of interesting. It's like you kind of threaten a choke from the side control position, and then kind of pull down and then put your knee up over their onto their gut. Like go knee on belly with them, and then just swing that leg over and assume the mount. But as far as the rest of the class goes, I did not get completely destroyed during the open matches that we were doing, but I was still a little too grippy. I did manage to loosen it up one time and reset it back to where I was in a standing position, and I think I've pointed that out on this show that's something that I've been wanting to do, where I press the issue, and then come back up onto my feet, change position, press the issue, and kind of double crush. But definitely trying to get back up onto my feet, and thinking about either repositioning or simply just getting away from the situation. Say in a self defense situation, that's usually the most prudent thing to do, is just trying to get the fuck away from it. And you got to be able to stand up before you do that. So, but we covered a couple takedowns. Although we didn't spend like the entire class on takedowns, which is fine. But we did go almost a full progression from a standing position all the way down to being in full mount. There was a little bit of breakage in the link between the standing, the position you ended up in the standing position, to the ground position, but I could definitely see with a little bit of effort you could easily fit all of it together in like one big chain. Unfortunately, today was one of those days where I was not able to fully implement everything that I just learned in jiu-jitsu. It didn't seem to be clicking 100%. So it's one of those things where I'll definitely have to do a lot more reps. A lot more. Anyways, with that, I want to go ahead and throw down into some music. I haven't the slightest clue where we're going to go as far as subject matter is concerned, but we'll figure it out. We always do. And as far as the first dance is concerned, what should we play? Escape from the Prison Planet. First Dance, here on Coin Metal. And that was Fear Factory with Shock. Yeah, shock to the system. Anywho, as far as where we're going to go today, man, I am all over the place with my tabs. It just happens that way sometimes that, for whatever reason, I start clicking and, man, I come up with some really interesting stuff. I'm looking at the price right now for Bitcoin, $39.33. Pretty damn tasty. I'm liking that. Anyway, as far as where exactly I wanted to go with that, I'm not entirely sure. Let's go ahead and start off with the first tab that I actually have open. No, that's a kind of interesting one too. Man, I always find like the best stuff to read on my Twitter feed. I don't know what it is. It just, I got it all set up right, or Twitter's got me programmed right, or whatever. But yeah, I always seem to find exactly what I'm looking for as far as, new material or the types of material. You know what I mean? And this one caught me, and it's funny because it's actually Newsweek, and I don't know this aspect of it. I'll go on to the other aspect of it that I'm thinking of afterward. But yeah, this is on Newsweek.com. U.S. could restrict Visa MasterCard transactions in Venezuela to Maduro supporters. And this is by Scott McDonald, and it was authored 3/15/2019 at 12:37 a.m. Eastern Data, or EDT. Yeah, whatever EDT is. Continuing. While Venezuela remains in a tussle between President Nicolas Maduro against his citizens and U.S. recognized interim President Juan Guaido, the United States could impose more sanctions that would restrict Visa and MasterCard transactions in the country. This would affect spending and financial transactions by the Maduro regime and those in his closest circles, according to a Reuters report. In other words, the financial constriction could have a trickle-down effect starting at the top. Quote, "The purpose of these sanctions is to continue to deprive the illegitimate Maduro..." Who the fuck is saying what about who's supposed to be the legitimate ruler of Venezuela? I think that's supposed to be the Venezuelan people. If in fact they actually opposed his presence as their president as much as our media would like to depict that, I don't think he would actually be in power right now. I think they would have kicked his ass out. So, as far as I'm concerned, the only people that are challenging his legitimacy as the leader of Venezuela is the media. Anyway, continuing on. The purpose of these sanctions is to continue to deprive the illegitimate Maduro regime of access to funds and deny their ability to continue stealing from the Venezuelan people, a White House official said in the report. Though nothing has been finalized regarding sanctions, the gist of it would affect elite loyalists to Maduro military officials aligned with the president, supporters who haven't defected, and Cuba militia operating in Venezuela on behalf of Maduro. The sanctions mentioned from the White House official would block any state-owned banks and other Venezuelan financial institutions from having access to the Visa and MasterCard financial systems, including credit card providers. The sanctions would also go so far as blocking access to SWIFT, a financial messaging service based in Belgium. This wouldn't be the first sanction placed by President Donald Trump against Venezuela since the U.S. recognized Guaido as Venezuela's interim president at the end of January. The sanctions that could be imposed against Venezuela slightly mirror those the White House had already imposed against Iran, North Korea, Syria, and parts of the Russian regime. Trump's administration has already hit PDVSA, a Venezuelan-owned oil company, with financial sanctions since the Maduro-Guaido rift began. You mean since we created it? Those include limiting the exports to the United States in an effort to curb Maduro's power. Last month, Trump implored the Maduro regime to, quote, "end this nightmare of poverty, hunger, and death." Dude, you're the one imposing it. If anybody should end it, it's you. I don't get that, you know. Anyway, continuing. Venezuela endured a power blackout earlier this week before it was restored Thursday afternoon. The blackout affected electricity, water, telephone, and internet to the millions of residents who didn't defect to neighboring countries for one reason or another. Some areas in the socialist-run country are still without power, according to The Guardian. The Central University of Venezuela's Facility of Engineering said the blackout was caused by a brush fire, and that the experts said that power might not be restored in some areas for at least 2 months. The United States has withdrawn its diplomats from the country already, and the U.S. State Department has advised U.S. citizens who might be in Venezuela that commercial flights are still available in and out of the South American country. Yeah, as far as this whole thing is concerned, I think it's just a greater case for cryptocurrencies. You know, when you're outside of this whole SWIFT-based system, you don't have to worry about this bullshit. You know, they can try and put sanctions on like a Bitcoin wallet address, but you could just as easily move the funds from one wallet to another, and then it's in a place that they'll have to go back and say, now this one's blacklisted, and you can just keep doing that if you really wanted to. Or of course you could take it to an exchange that would actually cash the coins out, and I don't know. You can do a lot of other things. I'm not gonna sit here and lay it out like it's some sort of criminal conspiracy. Oh man, I got my ass beat. Anyway, Venezuela getting their Visa and MasterCard restricted. You know, they could just as easily use like Dogecoin. I mean, you know, if it became an issue. It's like, oh, okay, you don't want to transact with us? No problem. Hey, Russia, we got our Petro that we can do transactions in, or, you know, if you don't really trust that, we actually have an exchange rate available for the Dogecoin to our Petro, and we could just do this transaction in Dogecoin, and the U.S. can just go blow something. What do you think? You know, I mean... And it could be going on right now under the headings of proxies, and U.S. authorities would have absolutely no idea. You know, I think that's the other aspect of cryptocurrencies that it's kind of dangerous almost, and only so because the only reason I say it's not is because the same ability, the same level of autonomy is granted to everybody that's using them on chain anyway. As soon as you start adding third parties in, then you start having risks. You know, so i.e. anything beyond a basic wallet. You know, you start talking about your Casa node or off-chain transactions and whatnot. I see that as a development path that's pretty much designed to get dominated by really huge centralized service providers, you know, such as Wells Fargo or Visa or MasterCard. And at that point, they would be able to say, oh, okay, we'll extend these sanctions and all that other shit into your cryptocurrency transactions too. So now not only can you not transact US dollars or other fiat currencies on our network, you now can no longer transact cryptocurrencies if you use our services. But then of course at that point it would be incredibly expensive to use Bitcoin simply because the transaction fees would make it prohibitively expensive. You know, for the average user, is not going to be paying $100 plus for one transaction fee in order to get their transaction included in a block. And I don't care if we're talking about going shopping or establishing a payment channel so that you can do a bunch of shopping. You still have to fund the channel, and that still has to be done with the transaction, an on-chain transaction. That has an on-chain transaction fee. And it's not going to go down just because, you know, it's a payment channel transaction. If anything, it'd probably go up specifically because of that. And so this becomes a major bottleneck. You know, this is why I knew when they refused to increase the block size originally back in like 2014. I'm like, oh, okay, this is going to be a choke point. This is going to be used as a bottleneck to funnel the transaction processing of Bitcoin transactions into the hands of a third-party gatekeeper. And Lightning came along as a theoretical solution not long after. A coincidence? I think not. And it's been like that this whole time. And not only that, though, in addition to that, ever since I think 2014, when BitLicense came out, and FinCEN said what they said about money transmitters and custodians and all that other business. That was pretty much it. Where they thought they developed some crafty wording that would allow them to regulate something within the cryptocurrency space. And all it's really turned out to be is the point where you have a third party conducting a transaction or an exchange for you. And in that position, they call that either a money transmitter or a custodian, depending on what your actual function is. Are you storing the funds long term or even short term for a customer? Or are you facilitating the transaction between a customer and a company or whatever? A retailer. And so they already have all kinds of frameworks, because these are very trusted positions. You have to be able to be trusted to hold on to people's funds and not piss it away on boats and hoes. You have to be able to be trusted to faithfully conduct the transaction on a very, very high rate of success. You need to be hitting that 99%, And when you consider things like chargebacks and people not having liquidity and bumping out of the payment channel and whatnot, these are all aspects of the Lightning Network that make it kind of clear that the only way you can really manage something like that reliably with any kind of real consistency is to have one entity managing the majority of the nodes involved in the transaction, because they are managing the balances on each of them. They don't have to worry about, Bobby Joe going out and shopping, on the spur of a moment. You got a new girlfriend, wants to take her out, gets her box of chocolates and maybe some flowers or some jewelry or something like that. Makes a completely aberrant transaction, and all of a sudden the liquidity isn't there, and you can't route through him. You got to be able to account for all of that shit for all of the nodes that are out there. So I see that as a management problem that, it's something that goes completely away if you have one entity managing all of it. I mean, it doesn't go away entirely. You still have to manage it. But the incidence of aberrant transactions or aberrant behavior on your end is probably a lot lower than if you have individuals running each of the nodes involved in the transaction. And see, my thought on it, and I've said this multiple times to a couple people on Twitter, where they'll post pictures of all the hardware that they're going to set up so that they could be doing their own Lightning Network transactions at home. And honestly, I gotta say, I find the excitement in it very inspiring. It's one of those things that I always enjoyed about cryptocurrencies, is that people are taking the reins. If you say, hey man, you can participate in this, people pick up the reins and run with them. They go out there to Fry's and they throw down, $200-300 for a bunch of hardware for conducting these Lightning Network transactions. I think that's really cool. But I point out to them that, if you were to take the same amount of money and you were to go to, say, Amazon, you could probably buy one, possibly even two ASIC miners. Not GPUs, ASIC miners that you could be setting up at home in the stead of all of that hardware that you're going to be setting up for your Lightning Network, and you could be mining. Why wouldn't you mine? If you're going to dedicate all the electricity that's going to be involved with all that hardware after you've set it up, why not put it to mining instead? I'm certain it would be more profitable. And when you consider the other aspects of mining, number one, you're voicing your opinion on which version of Bitcoin should be the dominant one. Because it's you that's setting up the hardware, right? So if you like SegWit transactions, yes. Say yes to SegWit transactions. If you like a particular BIP that's come across and there's a mining pool that you can set up and mine it on, there you go. You voice your support for it. You can also be voicing your support for a specific mining pool. You like their reward system, so you want to dedicate your hashing power to their efforts in finding the blocks and getting that block reward. These are all aspects of the mining end of things that quote-unquote decentralize the network, strengthens the network. It's not necessarily the mining pool or even the entity that's writing up all the software that's the really dominant, power player in this. It's the person that sets up hardware and dedicates the time, electricity, bandwidth, software, and hardware to the process of mining on these networks. That's the person that really counts. That's the real power. And so when you look at what a Lightning Network node does versus what a miner does, you can see that one has an actual representation of the constituency of the network and the security of the network, and the other does not. The other just facilitates transactions in somebody else's wallet. But anyway, yeah. So if I'm right, and out of everything that I've indicated, I think it's pretty good likelihood. I mean, when you look at how mining has become a centralized kind of thing, where you do have warehouses full of miners, pretty much scattered all over China and all over the planet. When you look at it that way, it's not hard to imagine that if a major entity that's already a payments processor might come to dominate the Lightning Network payment channel whole business, that they would be providing you with either custodial wallets or custodial services, and again, it kind of bumps you out of it, But if that were to happen, if we were to get a major third party like that, then Venezuela trying to participate on currencies or with currencies that require payment channels such as Bitcoin, they suddenly would not be on the network. They would have to use another cryptocurrency. Either that or they would have to start their own in order to continue to be able to transact among themselves and, of course, the broader market at large. But they would be able to continue to survive. They would be able to continue to keep account of things on an economic level, on a financial level. And again, they would be able to continue to circumvent these sanctions and whatnot with cryptocurrencies. Like I said, that this is the issue with these countries that, you know, they've talked about having their own cryptocurrency, like Iran, I think Zimbabwe, France, Greece. There have been a few others where they've talked about, oh, we're going to have our own cryptocurrency, and we're going to issue it, and we're going to you know, regulate it and all that other shit. Well, you know, the same people that are sanctioning you, that are making you look into using cryptocurrencies in order to transact to begin with, could be just saying no to your cryptocurrency too. You know, they could pull a Trump and say, no, you can't transact in no U.S. citizens can transact in Petros or France coin or whatever. That's the strength of keeping cryptocurrencies as something that is international, because then it takes away all of the sanction limitations. There are probably other ways to try and border access to cryptocurrencies and their networks, but you know, such as loss of electricity. That's a really big one. I know. I dealt with it not too long ago, like 2-3 weeks ago. You know, we had 2 feet of snow out here and literally no electricity for a week. So yeah, I know all about no electricity and how that impacts your ability to even look into the cryptocurrency markets. So it's one thing to secure above all else if you are going to endeavor in what I'm talking about, where you just use publicly mined cryptocurrencies to conduct your daily affairs. You know, don't even worry about it. Don't worry about taxation and whatnot. Worry about keeping the fucking lights on. Worry about keeping people's vehicles on the road, people fed, people able to pay their bills. You know, these are the important things. That's what keeps what we understand as Western commerce going, is a medium of exchange that we can purchase goods and services with. But that doesn't require a nation state. It doesn't require a government regulatory entity. What it does require is your choice. You know, when you look at the available options and you say, you know what is going to allow me to move money from me to somebody in Bangladesh the cheapest, the fastest, most efficient way possible? What's going to do that? It might not be Bitcoin. It might be some tiny altcoin like Verge or Doge or Holocoin, or you know, something really, really tiny, because the transaction fee is going to be nothing. And some of those currencies have really, really fast confirm times. So, you know, you could be moving billions of dollars, thousands of miles in minutes. And you could be doing it, you know, you set up like a time lock transaction, and I don't even want to get into that stuff, the contract for that. It's all kinds of goofy stuff. Anyway, point being that that's possible. That's been possible since about 2011. And so the idea that we would even be talking about nation currencies at this point, it bugs me every time I see it. It's like, well, why are you even talking about that? Have you not been paying attention to this space for the last fucking decade? Anyway, let's go ahead and throw back down into some music. And I've been wanting to play some Gizmochi. And so here it is. The answer. Here on Coin Metal. And that was Down with Bury Me in Smoke. Yeah. Hopefully it's some of the stuff like I grew last year. Man. There's some stuff, man, that, You get a hold of it, and it gets a hold of you, and it's like love, kinda, but not really, because then it runs out, and then it sucks. Anywho, as far as what we're going to go into in continuation of this theme, we were just talking about big centralized players taking over transaction processing of a cryptocurrency, i.e. Bitcoin being the one in question. And so here it is. This is on CoinDesk. IBM scores nationwide blockchain deal with France's commercial court clerks. This is by Anna Baydakova. My apologies, Anna. So no penis. This is authored March 14th, 2019 at 1945 UTC. Court clerks across France will soon be recording changes in companies' legal status on a hyperledger blockchain built by IBM. The National Council of Clerks (NCC) project has already undergone tests involving 4 court clerks and IT providers, IBM said Thursday, and the system is planned to go into full-scale production in the first half of 2019. The goal is to allow clerks in commercial courts who maintain the country's Register of Commerce and companies do their job better and faster. The clerks will use the system to share regulatory information about the difficulties companies experience, as well as changes in their status, like a change of court office in which a company is registered, name changes, new branch office openings. When this information needs to be updated, the process can involve multiple regions so that local registries need to coordinate. And here's where the, quote, single source of truth afforded by blockchain tech can help. In a pilot, IBM said making an update to the registry took only 1 day instead of several days. While enhancing the speed and transparency of the system, the technology can also make the French commercial and corporate registry a technological leader in the European Union, IBM believes. Quote, the initiative is a first in the justice sector in France and is a perfect example of blockchain's role in helping regulated professions as they transform, Vincent Fournier, senior management for blockchain at IBM France, said in a press release, quote, blockchain's qualities are ideal for this use, improving the clerk's business processes and adapting to the ever-changing nature of their missions. Sophie Joanval, president of the NCC, said the project responds to the, quote, expectations and requirements of today's multipolar and interconnected economic world, adding, quote, we must be both pragmatic and at the forefront of progress on a technology such as blockchain. The latter represents a major potential technology for our profession and for the modernization of tools of commerce, justice, reflecting our status, our mission, and our professional rules. Yeah, okay. Well, the problem that I see with regard to Hyperledger, IBM, whatever, is that you experience the effect that we've talked about many times on this show, which is a central point of failure. Let's just say that you're moving around enough information that is worth getting access to, and maybe you don't have it encrypted, maybe you do have it encrypted. The cipher itself would be a treasure, depending again on the data being used or being circulated here. What's the incentive? I mean, what is the price of security that you're willing to pay for it, basically? If you really wanted to, you could be doing all the transactions that you need to do and keep track of on an international basis on a public blockchain with a public cryptocurrency. And this is where the value of cryptocurrencies can come into the state, and not even private ones like IBM is talking about. I mean, if you can consider the amount of infrastructure you need for just a small scale mining unit, right? Where you're mining 6, maybe 7 different cryptocurrencies, and you're counting you're taking transactions on public blockchains and noting in, like, binding them with records that you have in your database, so that they're closely associated. You can draw up one with the reference to the other, or a file associated directly with the transaction on the blockchain. But it doesn't even have to be a specific blockchain. It could just be the one that's cheapest and the one that's available for you at the time. You know, say you don't have Dogecoin or anything like that. Maybe you only have Monero. But you would be able to count the transactions in a publicly verifiable way. And again, if you're investing in actually mining the cryptocurrency in question, okay, now you've taken the step that we've all taken here in cryptocurrencies, where the government entity itself is now dedicating hardware, electricity, bandwidth, and time to the process of securing the blockchain. Why? Because it's now within their interest to do so. What they use the transactions for is irrelevant. And this is why the type of regulatory frameworks that we've been talking about that government entities have been wanting to impose on cryptocurrencies make absolutely no sense in the context of trying to utilize cryptocurrencies to enhance the functions of government and the efficiency of government. You know, we've already done all the hard work. We've already established the fucking networks. We've already got the protocols out there deployed on a global basis. Why you wouldn't use those, as opposed to, again, hiring IBM and hiring a team of people to manage the system and having to endure all the regulatory cruft of that bullshit? I mean, really, it's if you were to take those two choices and do a cost benefit of them, you'd find that using Dogecoin as the base layer for your transactions that you're recording all of your data on would be far cheaper than hiring IBM. And the simplification that it increases as far as, like, where you're storing your information, you're storing it everywhere. I mean, only you would really know what it means. Only you would really have the context for it. And maybe you were smart and did encrypt it, or it was encrypted in the kind of data packet that was associated with it. But the point being that these networks exist. The confidence in them is one of the things we express when we're dedicating hardware and electricity to any of them. You know, maybe you wanted to do it all on Ethereum. You know, they've got the whole ICO mechanism so that you can issue your own tokens and all that other bullshit. Again, I think that a lot of these projects, IBM and whatever, I think a lot of them are just pissing up a rope. You know, they're so used to being in a paradigm where dominance, you know, is something that is an imposed thing. You know, it's not something that is just a product of public choice. It's like by limitation of public choice. You know, you get it regulated out of existence. I think that's one of the reasons why cryptocurrencies exist, is because the prospect of trying to regulate them and activities on them is so fucking nuts that you don't even want to bother with it. It's like, whatever. Why are we going to bother with this shit? It's more trouble than it's worth. Oh, what? People have been laundering some money on it? Yeah, whatever. The $65 billion was fucking laundered yesterday, so, who really cares? It's just a flash in the pan. I mean, we do that much volume in maybe a month. And that's like all legit transactions. I don't know. Trading is probably a bit higher than that. But the point being that regulation or what the function of regulation does in a lot of cases it just doesn't apply with cryptocurrencies. You make certain choices when you use a specific cryptocurrency that kind of, when it's outside of the fiat system, it's by default out of their regulatory realm. But beyond that, you're making a vote of confidence in a specific currency or network by using theirs. And so it's kind of silly to me, to have a singular entity managing all of this stuff for you, when the fact of the matter is they exist so that you don't need a centralized entity managing it. You can develop your own context for how you use the information. It's not something that IBM has to define for you. And again, the level of regulatory cruft that going about it this way it burdens the system. It kind of takes away all the efficiency of it. All of the efficiency gains, like, they're talking about a transaction or some exchange of value taking a day. Give me a fucking break. If they did the transaction on the Verge network, it would have taken 30 seconds. That leaves a lot of seconds left in the day that you could be doing something else. I don't know. Maybe it's the momentum of the thing that you're traveling at light speed with the volume of government agencies that you're involving in something, and all of the entities and all of the people that are involved with that are being paid to do that, and all of a sudden you're just going to throw the emergency brake on it and just say, yeah, you guys can all go home now. We don't need you anymore. I mean, I'm sure there are vast swaths of government that all they do is circulate paper. Move messages from A to B. Make implementations across the board. When you can do all of that stuff in transactions that only take 30 seconds to be globally settled, that changes the game quite a bit. So you would expect there to be some resistance. I mean, we've been resisting robots. I fight against robots today too. I was in Albertsons, one of the local grocery stores here, and they have those checkout kiosks. I avoid those things like the plague. I don't go to the grocery store so I can check myself out. I go so that the checker can check my stuff out and get that process done. Call me old-fashioned. That's the way I view going to the grocery store. And it seems like the local grocery store has been trying to encourage people to use the auto checkout instead. Well, and for me, what that's just going to do is force me to go to some other place that doesn't mind serving the customer service aspect of hosting a grocery store or having a grocery store. There is one there. Anyway, we were just talking about IBM trying to be the crypto infrastructure for, at least on a test level, for France's government. And I got this other article off of CoinDesk, and this kind of makes me laugh a little bit, but I'm not gonna go into why, at least not yet. Decentralized or nothing. Song duels with IBM over blockchain hype at SXS or South by Southwest. And this is by Brady Dale. I'm going by the Thai Yes Penis. Authored March 15th, 2019, 9 o'clock UTC, updated March 15th, 2019 at 1720 UTC. More or less decentralized? For Jimmy Song, there is no in-between. An author and Bitcoin fellow at venture firm Blockchain Capital, Song made that point repeatedly in a debate with an IBM engineer and Hyperledger Fabric co-lead, Chris Ferris, at South by Southwest Thursday, where he told the crowd at the Hilton Austin in no uncertain terms, quote, "You either have control over your stuff or you don't. It's a 0 or a 1. The debate pitted permissioned blockchains, the private networks being pitched to big businesses, against permissionless blockchains, the technology undergirding Bitcoin and other open source networks. Billed as the death match on the festival agenda, Song was determined to give the audience what they came for, quote, "Why do you need permission if it's supposed to be decentralized?" he asked. "There has to be an entity that's giving you permission, and that's by definition centralized." While Song took the binary view of decentralization, Ferris argued that blockchains can exist on a spectrum. Sure, permissioned blockchains are less decentralized, Ferris said, but their added trust mechanisms mitigate perceived risk. Perceived risk, dipshit, not real risk. And you know what? That's what really counts. It's not the perception of risk, it's the real risks. Those are the ones that count. Continuing, quote, "Permissionless blockchains do not necessarily solve the problem of trust," he added. Oh, that's bullshit. Song wasn't having it. To illustrate the degree to which he was willing to extend his point, Song used the example of the Ethereum fork following the infamous hack of the DAO, when the project's developers and users agreed to a code update aimed at rolling back the stolen funds. Quote, "I think Ethereum is a permissioned blockchain," Song said, adding, quote, "When Vitalik says these particular transactions aren't particularly good for the ecosystem, so we're going to roll them back, that to me is a permissioned blockchain." On stage and in conversation with CoinDesk beforehand, Song argued that every application of blockchain to anything but Bitcoin is a waste. Quote, "Blockchain is really useful for Bitcoin," he said during the debate. Quote, "Everything else has a central point of failure." To some extent, I would agree with that. Prior to the debate, Ferris told CoinDesk that he hoped he could make the point that there's just different use cases for different kinds of blockchains, and those use cases should determine what level of decentralization should be called for. Man. That's what you solve with the choice of which cryptocurrency you decide to use. You know, there are only like 2,000 live networks out there right now that you can choose from. I'm sure one of them fits your use case. Continuing, quote, "Certainly part of the conversation will be that Bitcoin doesn't solve the problems we are trying to solve in an enterprise context," Ferris told CoinDesk. Dude, you're so full of shit. Just because you haven't figured out how to use it that way, or in a way that fits your enterprise context, doesn't mean that it doesn't actually fit it. Continuing, IBM, he explained, is primarily building products that allow, quote, "large enterprise partners to share information rather than exchange money." For example, today Big Blue announced a deal to record information about businesses' legal status across France. Trying to find some common ground, Ferris argued that there's space for the approaches from both sides. Quote, "I think there's a ton of use cases where permissioned blockchains make a ton of sense," Ferris said. "I also think there's a ton of use cases where a permissioned blockchain doesn't make any sense." But Song didn't come to accept concessions. He said all blockchains besides Bitcoin's might as well just run on a faster, cheaper, centralized database. That's more or less the truth right there. Continuing, a permissioned blockchain is an oxymoron because it's a centralized database that's masquerading as something decentralized, Song said. The exchange case. The Quadriga CX exchange debacle captured the difference between the two positions better than any other part of the debate. I don't know why, dude. It has absolutely nothing to do with the other. The Canadian exchange's owner died and lost $190 million worth of cryptocurrency when it turned out he was the only person with access to the system's private keys. Dude, that's bullshit. Apparently this person, whoever wrote this article, and I'll go back up and verify his name, has not paid attention to that particular debacle. They found out that the money was gone months before then. It's been gone for a while. It didn't just fucking disappear when he died. Or maybe he didn't die, as the case may be. Continuing on. When it turned out he was the only person with access to the system's private keys. Both Song and Ferris saw a disaster and yet came to a very different conclusion about it. Ferris brought up Quadriga late in the debate by first saying, quote, "The whole point of permissioned blockchain, enterprise blockchain, is reducing risk," he said. Yeah, whatever. Actually, it doesn't reduce risk. It reduces risk to the again, it's all perceptual, man. You know, it limits the risk taker to I guess the company in question. You know, so for IBM, their whole permission blockchain, they're taking on the risk. I mean, but of course their customers are taking the risk by trusting them with it. In cryptocurrencies, we don't need trust because it's distributed. It's all over the fucking place. It's not something that we have to trust. We can verify. Continuing. Ferris brought up Quadriga late in the debate by saying the whole point of permitting, yeah, okay, it's a system where every major user of the protocol knows everyone else. We can put a governance model over that and legal framework around that says, quote, "If you do something to disrupt the system, we'll sue the pants off you and you'll regret that," Ferris said. Song saw that as precisely the problem. If it's possible for a governing body to step in and punish the operators of a platform, then to Song that defeats the fundamental point of decentralization. Ferris saw Quadriga as an illustration of the fundamental user experience problem of permissionless systems because it illustrates dramatically how Bitcoin doesn't have a fallback if private keys are lost. But Song saw that as a virtue. Quote, "You're either self-sovereign or you're not." Well, that's kind of a valid point. Like I said, I hate attributing any conceding any valid points to Jimmy Song because sometimes I don't believe the way he comes to his conclusions is actually right. Shit. Anyway, but yeah, the whole debate, whatever. I think that they're both not right. I don't know. I think to some extent Jimmy Song is correct, but just repeating the same thing over and over and over again and not actually giving any real context for what you're saying, or at least they're not quoting it here. I don't know. It's not really of value. You know, you gotta tell them why. But anyway, I think that the whole idea of a permission blockchain is silly because a permission blockchain requires its own dedicated infrastructure. You know, you're not doing it across people's computers using their hashing power for your purposes. And the fact of the matter is it's there to be used. And again, the context that you use it in and the way that you log the transactions and what information you associate with the transactions, that's all on you. You know, this is a case, I think, for Lightning. I mean, if you were to use the Lightning for anything, you could replace this quote-unquote, permission blockchain with it. You know, you establish the rules via the payment channel. If the transactions in your payment channel aren't conforming, don't conform to the rules, they don't make it into the end transaction when you close out the payment channel. They just don't get counted. And so that takes care of all this quote-unquote enforcement necessity and this trust. It either conforms to the standards of the transactions being processed in the payment channel, or it doesn't. And this is where cryptocurrencies in just an on-chain context work out the best. Because the transactions, again, they don't require a specific grouping of people to process them. You put them on the network, they get processed, or they don't. They either conform with the standards for that network, the protocols for that network, or they don't. They're either in the currency for that network, or they are not. So, I think it's one of the things that's been lost in this whole conversation with how exactly to apply cryptocurrencies and blockchains in the context of government and in the context of corporate structures. Again, if you can take a corporate structure and eliminate all of its databases, except for maybe one or two that you would be hosting a live version of the blockchain on, and maybe some miners, because you want to make sure that the network is actually there to be able to bring your transactions back up again. It's part of the whole quote-unquote security, but that's the extent of your quote-unquote security necessity. You don't need IBM. You don't need the fucking cadre of security and support personnel that you're going to need for IBM's hardware on your premises. And I'm sure their service isn't free. That they're you're signing on as a client of theirs, so you're not just hosting their hardware and hiring staff that are probably their employees of IBM or trained by IBM. So they're not cheap. So you can see when you start considering it in that context, there are a lot more people that know how to service set up hardware for processing Doge transactions than there are IBM technicians that can handle their Hyperledger project. This is another of the advantages of quote-unquote centralized projects and privatized projects. Stuff that's based on proprietary IP and stuff that's open source. And we've already learned that lesson before. We learned that lesson with Linux. Back in 2000, people were like, what choice do we have but to use Windows? And there were already people using versions of Minix and Linux by then. But, the question was, how do we get away from these proprietary limitations that we're experiencing? Every time that we want to do something with Microsoft software, we got to go to them, we got to get a license or permission in order to do it. This blows. What can we do to get around this? And then Linux started coming into more popular use, and then all of a sudden it's in everything. It's in your fucking refrigerator, it's in your TV, it's in your tablet, it's in your phone, it's in your car. Considering cryptocurrencies and development in that context, you got Mac OS, you got Windows, or you got Linux. And Mac OS and Windows have permission structures that you got to go through, and a whole bunch of red tape and a whole bunch of bullshit that you have to go through that you simply you can circumvent by going with Linux. And so what do people do? They impregnate fucking Linux into everything. So again, we've already learned this lesson. And IBM had better get fucking sharp on this. I've been saying this since I heard they were getting into Hyperledger. It's like, dude, you're known for what? You are known for making great fucking hardware. Industrial strength hardware. Why you aren't making miners instead of fucking around with this Hyperledger bullshit is beyond me. Because in the longer term, I see Bitcoin winning out, and the use of Bitcoin winning out over people using Hyperledger. They'll be using it for the same fucking thing, but the people that are using Bitcoin don't have to undergo all of the infrastructure costs that using Hyperledger will have associated with them. And that's why it's going to eventually win out. So again, why they're not capitalizing on their reputation with regard to hardware manufacturers and again, enterprise class hardware. Why they aren't flexing that and trying to expand it even further into the consumer markets by making consumer grade miners. And when I say consumer grade, I'm talking about really high performance hardware at relatively cheaper prices than we're currently experiencing. Get a little more competition in there. I don't understand really, why they've focused so much more on the idea of entrapping into various infrastructures, especially with government. I mean, I can see the temptation, but again, I think in the longer term, we're going to see lesser developed countries just say, you know what? We know this about cryptocurrencies, that they can move money all around the fucking planet. We could be documenting our stuff using cryptocurrencies and in the transactions, putting data that we want to record in the transactions and just avoid having to host all these servers. Instead of having the servers, we can put in some miners, maybe even make some money for the country. And now you see how what hyper Bitcoinization really should be talking about is the use of publicly mined cryptocurrencies for pretty much everything that we would otherwise use dedicated databases and permission ledgers and all that other shit to be recording. To me, that's what hyper Bitcoinization should be. Anyway, let's go ahead and throw down into some music. And I got fucking Sixth playing. I've already played some Sixth, so I don't really want to go that route. But I don't think we've played any Megadeth. And we haven't played this song in a long time, especially not on a Friday, and it is Friday. So here it is. Good morning, Black Friday, here on Coin Metal. And that was Skindred with Nobody. Man, I love that song. Anyway, we were talking earlier about, I guess, IBM and what's his face, Jimmy's song, dueling it out at South by Southwest, and apparently that wasn't the only bombshell to be dropping there. This is on decryptmedia.com. SEC's CryptoCzar. Stablecoins might be violating securities laws. Oh gosh. More stablecoin projects might soon find themselves in the SEC's crosshairs. By the way, this is by Guillermo Jimenez. So yes, penis. This was authored March 16th, 2019. So apparently Guillermo is a time traveler. My apologies on that. Hispanic broke down. On Friday, the SEC's senior advisor for digital assets, Valerie Hispanic, told crypto-curious crowd at Austin's South by Southwest conference that certain types of stablecoins, quote, could raise issues under securities laws. Actually, I would suggest that all of them can, actually. Hispanic broke down stablecoins into three categories. Stablecoins, quote, tied to some real asset like real estate or gold or oil, quote, coins tied to a fiat currency held in reserve, and a third category that could become problematic under the law, she said. Quote, I've seen stablecoins that purport to control price through some kind of pricing mechanism, whether it's tied to the issuance, creation, or redemption of another type of digital asset tied to it, or whether it's controlled through supply and demand in some way to keep the price within a certain band. It's these kinds of projects where there is one central party controlling the price fluctuation over time that Hispanic said, quote, might be getting into the land of securities. Oh shit, you mean like Tether? While Hispanic hedged a bit by saying that the commission would have to, quote, look at the facts and circumstances of each individual project, the SEC's, quote, crypto czar said it all comes down to the expectations that stablecoin issuers impart on their buyers. Quote, you're talking about folks who are buying into that ecosystem or buying this coin with the expectation that somebody else is going to be holding a profit or guaranteed a profit or holding the price at a certain level. Again, that could raise issues under securities laws. The legal status of stablecoins has been in question for some time, especially the class of, quote, algorithmic stablecoins that aren't backed by any collateral at all. Actually, I would argue that none of them are backed by actual collateral at all, at least not initially. In fact, last December, one such stablecoin project, Basis, abruptly closed up shop after raising a whopping $135 million from investors, and then hearing from the SEC that it would likely not be able to avoid being classified as security. But crypto attorneys such as Jake Cheminsky had previously expressed concern over how the SEC or CFTC might ultimately come down on all manner of stablecoins, even those backed by fiat. And there's a little underscore there. Let's click on that one, put that up in a link. Hispanic also noted that the SEC is unconcerned with what label a blockchain business slaps on their token, stablecoin or otherwise. It will still be met with the same scrutiny. Quote, folks like to put labels on things, but will always look behind the label to see exactly what's happening, she said. So, if you can call it a utility coin, call it a stable coin, call it a consumptive coin, or some other coin, we're going to look at the characteristics. What's the economic reality? What's happening with the transactions involving the coin? And we'll give it the label that it deserves under the law. Yeah, whatever. Her advice for crypto startups looking to stay on the commission's good side: ask for permission, not forgiveness. No. Just do what you're gonna do. Figure it. Quote, not to sound cliche, but we'd much rather people come to us and ask for permission or come to talk to us before they do something rather than doing something and then coming in and asking for forgiveness. In other words, slow down and stop breaking stuff. How's that trendy book title? How's that for a trendy book title? Yeah, I don't see that happening. I've said this multiple times. Any kind of slowdown in any one area, it doesn't do anything. All it does is shift the progress to somebody else. So, yeah, whatever. You know, I've said this multiple times too. and this is where I think the SEC and CFTC's preemptive matter when it comes to how they want to try and impose regulation on things. The problem with it is that it doesn't actually fit. You know, while they're trying to define things are just going on. And again, it's like trying to put your foot in quicksand and determine, you know, where the fall is actually going to stop before you actually step in it. You know, and I think in the long run, with that kind of mentality, all you're going to end up doing is corralling the U.S. out of a shit ton of activity that we could otherwise be making a lot of money on. You know, as far as the scrutiny of the SEC and the CFTC on cryptocurrencies, it befuddles me that they would pay so much attention to things like ICOs and whatnot. I mean, just because they're making money, and yes, you know, just because it's in crypto, it has not changed the ideas of what constitutes fraud, what constitutes a crime. We already have plenty of criminal definitions for what a criminal act is. You know, did people knowingly lie to other people? You know, did they misrepresent data? You know, did they steal people's money? You know, did they gather all that money and just go on vacation for a couple months? You know, those are things that you would normally consider to be criminal activity, regardless of the medium and concern. You know, whether we're talking about Bitcoin or US dollars. Fraud is still fraud. Theft is still theft. And so I think the idea of trying to get ahead of activities and rein them in just because, you know, it kind of looks kind of like what you do, or kind of like what you regulate, or kind of like what you had terminology for, kind of whatever. Again, how serious they take this stuff. You know, there were some ICOs that on their face, you look at them and you could tell that they were most likely going to be frauds. But in the end, it depends on what the people do. You know, they're talking about how they hammered down on basis. Well, you know, what was the basis for hammering down on them? Was it actual fraudulent activity? Or was it the SEC just being slightly overzealous with their authority? Personally, having been in this space as long as I have and seen what I've seen, I would probably vote the latter. They're just getting a little bit over crazy with their authority. Mm-hmm. You know, when it comes to publicly mineable cryptocurrencies, those are completely out of their realm of jurisdiction. There's nothing they can say about internationally mined cryptocurrencies. It's just outside their jurisdiction, and the rules for it have already been established. You either, if you agree with them and you've got the hardware and the electricity and the bandwidth to mine them or transact in them, there's nothing to stop you from doing so. And so the idea of trying to limit your activity to a specific jurisdiction is, again, silly. Let's go ahead and throw down our last dance for the evening. Thank you very, very much for listening. I certainly do appreciate the support. We will be back again on Monday at 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And so until then, I want y'all to trade safe, do your homework, and watch out for your own bunghole, because nobody else is going to do it for you. And as far as our last dance is concerned, I actually picked one out this time. Soundgarden, Rusty Cage, Last Dance, here on Coin Metal. Thank you again for listening, and you all have an excellent weekend.